All right, joining us now is the politics editor for the Daily Signal, Bradley Devlin. What's up, Bradley?
How's it going, guys? First off, kudos on the segment. Will, you guys are crushing it over here. Everything you guys are doing is turning to gold. But if this ever doesn't work out, you guys have a safe home at Animal Planet, I'm sure, because that crushed.
Thank you. It came up during the commercial break. Hey, what's the Chihuahua? And I think we've decided the Chihuahua is for sure on the left. That is a liberal
absolutely.
dog, the Chihuahua.
Yeah.
But I heard you have a dog that you have some opinions on, Bradley.
I rescued Siberian Huskies growing up. That was my dog. And any working dog is a right-wing dog. Every other dog that was bred for palaces and courts, I mean, these are welfare dogs. These are welfare queen dog version, and they are fundamentally on the left. That's where they belong. Chihuahuas, corgis, all of that stuff. And if anyone's like, no, my retriever, I swear it's a left-winger, it's like, at best, it's Joe Manchin, right? You know, it's still going hunting.
So your lab is on the right. So if you were bred for a palace, you're a welfare left dog. I love this. I got to think more about, so who, that's like all your, and you know what? A poodle would for sure be on the right. People don't,
yeah.
I mean, poodles are hunting dogs, wicked smart hunting dogs. And I think, 2 days, look that up. What is a poodle? Because I'm going counter to what everybody might think. A poodle is on the right. A lab is definitely on the right.
Poodle's liberal, it says.
Poodle, the small one, left. The big one, right.
It says Poodle's only drinks filtered water and his hair appointments twice a month.
That doesn't make it on the left, though.
You could
that
be
could
a
be
well-kept
rich
right-winger.
inner city. Yeah, exactly. That's you've got that too narrow. There are women in the cities like Dallas who have made sure every week that they look good, who are very right wing. So I think that's the poodle. You made me think of another dog really quickly. I can't. Oh, by the way, the standard poodle, the big poodle that you're talking about, Bradley, that's not even a dog. That is a person in a dog costume. My wife is convinced of it. They're not real dogs. If you're around them, they're creepy because you can tell inside there's actually a human being inside that dog costume.
Oh, they're like wicked smart too. You don't want to mess with one of those things. Those things, you'll think you're the alpha. You think you got everything under control. That standard poodle's absolutely fleecing you for all you're worth.
All right, Bradley Devlin, the politics editor at the Daily Signal, is here with us on Will Cain Country. Okay, this is an incredible story out of Washington, D.C. The man known as Big Balls, one of the Doge workers hired by Elon Musk to look into the federal government, find inefficiencies. He was famously featured in a Jesse Waters interview. He became somewhat infamous, was the victim of... It's not necessarily like a Cincinnati-style brawl. It was, I think, a carjacking of someone else that he tried to intervene with. And then he got beat by a bunch of, they said, 14 to 15-year-olds. Donald Trump posted the following with that picture, if you're watching us today, of Big Balls. Really bloody, shirtless. Trump said, crime in Washington, D.C. is totally out of control. Local, quote, youths and gang members, some only 14, 15, and 16 years old, are randomly attacking, mugging, maiming, and shooting innocent citizens at the same time, knowing that they will be almost immediately released. They are not afraid of law enforcement because they know nothing ever happens to them, but it's going to happen now. The law in D.C. must be changed to prosecute these minors as adults and lock them up for a long time, starting at age 14. And then he goes on to say that he's looking at potentially federalizing the D.C. police, Bradley.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is this has been an issue for Trump for years, especially during the first Trump administration. You saw this massive increase in D.C. crime, a lot of discontent, obviously, and that obviously carried over into the Biden years. And throughout Trump's time out of power, he was suggesting, hey, maybe D.C. home rule isn't such a great idea. Maybe what the founders meant in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the Constitution, that D.C. ought to be independent from all these other state governments, meant that Congress and the federal government should retain control over it. And when Congress abdicated its power over D.C. in the 70s, what have we seen since then? We've seen crime, disorder, filth all of this stuff just wreak havoc on this city, and it's a real shame because we wouldn't be faced with these carjackings if Congress were running D.C. Perfect example of this is actually the carjacking law that the D.C. City Council tried to pass over Muriel Bowser's veto, that caused Congress to step in a few years ago and say, no, we're not putting up with this type of legislation. What if Congress did that with every single piece of what the D.C. government is doing right now? The terrible prosecutions, all of the DEI programs, et cetera, et cetera. Congress has the ability, in short, to doge D.C. In a real and serious way, and they should do it. They should go forward with that type of effort. I'm totally in support of the president saying enough is enough here.
Well, we'll take a look at this. I was just pulling this up on my iPad here to share with you and the audience on my monitor here in studio. This is homicide rates in 2023. Look at this. Washington, D.C., United States, 41 homicides per 100,000 people. Now, compare that to other countries for a moment that are much more knowledgeably suffering from bad crime, meaning we all know about it. Lima, Peru, 7 per 100,000. Remember, D.C., 41. Havana, Cuba, 4 per 100,000. Nairobi, Kenya, 5. Brasilia, Brazil, 13. Lagos, Nigeria, 15. D.C. is 41. Mexico City, 8 per 100,000. Again, D.C. is 41. That is incredible state for Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it will. And there's this, the kind of nefarious thing that the left will do in seeing these statistics is they'll go, because of our gun laws, because we have the Second Amendment. Well, anyone who just use your eyes, walk around where you live, especially if you live in an urban area like D.C. or New York. Does the crime stop only at violent crime used with guns, with firearms? Or is it a pervasive crime problem? Do we have looting? Do we have stealing? Do we have shoplifting, right? This is not a single issue. It's an entire menu. It's an entire suite of criminal problems that we have in America's biggest cities. And the health of your society is going to be inculcated or defined by the health of your cities. And for very good reason, right? Because often these places are hubs of community and culture and also touch points for other places in the world. As much as we like to talk about revitalizing the heartland America and all of the disastrous effects of globalization that have kind of destroyed these local communities, that's so important. But at the same time, we can't just leave Los Angeles to Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. We can't just leave San Francisco to the whims of all of these politicians, or to New York City to Mamdani, because they're so vital to maintaining the health overall of the nation, and it's addressing crime issues all the way from homicide all the way down to shoplifting when you're a little teenager.
I mean, D.C. worse than Lagos, Nigeria? That really puts the problem into perspective. You know, I think, I'm just sitting here listening to you, and I'm just thinking, over the long term, I hear you, we got to save these cities. They're iconic, important American cities. I think that over the long term, what you're going to see, and I don't know, everybody's predicted this, but like cities like San Francisco and New York decline. And when I say decline, in population, certainly in quality of life, and that will drive the decline in population. First business, then population. That's what we're seeing potentially already happening in New York with the potential for Zohran Mamdani. Like, I can tell you, I live in a city that's booming, Bradley, and it is booming in ways that it is stealing from New York. Dallas, Texas is soon to be the home of 5,000 workers from Goldman Sachs. It'll be their biggest employment base in America. New York will still be the quote-unquote headquarters, but 5,000 in Dallas. There is, all rumors, but not yet full reports are, another major bank following Goldman to Dallas. They're launching the Texas Stock Exchange. And I think that's how it starts. People move out, and then your city death spirals. And maybe that when we look up 50 years from now, you're not talking about New York and D.C. and San Francisco as iconic American cities. You're talking about, I don't know, Dallas and maybe Nashville. The problem is we'll be fighting to keep those cities sane, right? that because they already have Democrat leaders in Nashville and Dallas and places like that. Not Dallas, he's a Republican mayor, but that's going to be the real fight. Can you keep the new America cities?
Right. And I just saw something come across my feed today where it says every year 100,000 people move from California to Texas. And luckily, all the transplants that I know that are going to states, I'm from Southern California originally, all the transplants that I know heading over to Dallas or to Nashville, living outside the Nashville area in Franklin, et cetera, they're all like staunch conservatives. They got out because the business environment became so toxic in California, and they remembered what it was like in the 80s, 70s, 60s, et cetera, when it was not nearly as hostile to business. But of course, with those good conservative transplants, you're going to be getting a lot of people, frankly, who haven't thought that deeply about their ideas or who are going after they've graduated university and they're just looking for economic opportunity. And the economic opportunity, the high-tech jobs aren't in San Francisco or LA anymore. They're in places like Provo and they're in places like Dallas. And so they'll move there and they'll bring their zany, weird ideas with them. And that is a real danger. And, maybe if you move to Boulder, Colorado, or someplace in Vermont that's rural, your community's insulated enough where your kind of left-wing kooky politics doesn't destroy the city instantaneously. But when you're in places like Dallas, Texas, that is like on the front lines of some of the most serious problems facing America, it too has a homelessness problem, right? It just that's
Right.
that's the fact. Austin has a homelessness problem. They have an immigration problem, right? They've got a lot of illegal immigrants, just like those cities in Southern California. And so when you import all of these California voters, if they don't have a serious awakening or serious change, all of those social dynamics are kind of primed to attack the city and to attack the community if you don't have prudent political voters and prudent political leadership.
Not just prudent. I think visionary. Really strong leadership. Really strong. Donald Trump level, which that's hard to match, but level style leadership you have to find at the city and state levels. Okay, I wanted to hit this with you too, Bradley. So Howard Stern, the reports are that SiriusXM is looking at not continuing with their contract starting next year, I believe, in May of 2026 with Howard Stern. He makes $100 million a year and has for about 20 years at SiriusXM. Obviously, in the 1980s and 1990s, Howard was massive on FM radio, FM and AM radio, and left in the early 2000s to go to SiriusXM. He got a massive contract, and I think any honest broker would tell you Howard Stern is a genre-breaking icon, iconoclast, that's probably the right word, legend in radio. I went through my phase of listening to Howard. Mine was later than most people. I probably hit Howard in the 2000 teens when I started listening to him. But it's a real question with SiriusXM. Is that worth $100 million anymore? It's hard to know exactly what his listenership is because SiriusXM doesn't put those numbers out very readily. But there's no doubt that Howard has changed over the years. He's 70-something years old. He's mainstream. He's not radical. He's not edgy. He's the guy that interviews Kamala and Hillary. He's scared of COVID. He's super woke. He's everything. And now it might be the end for Howard Stern.
Yeah, or Howard Stern tries to go independent, and that's going to be a real test. To see this person who made his career, as you said, being this unorthodox character, you never knew what he was going to say when he got to that microphone. And that's what made Rush so amazing, too. That's what made Andrew Breitbart so amazing, too, in his multimedia ventures, is these people were unpredictable, but they were always thoughtful, logical, exciting. That's what kept you hooked onto these programs. And Howard, I mean, in the last few years, like, I have to go back and listen to the old Howard Stern bits and the old Howard Stern segments to really get a taste of what made this guy an icon. When I was growing up, it was like, I don't really know if I care to listen to this person anymore. I'm going to go listen to some of these new players in the space. Of course, Rush was still around, so you'd listen to Rush. But, you know, Dan Bongino is getting his start. You know, all these different guys in sports radio, too, where you had Colin Cowherd, who's been in the business for a long time, but has really kind of surged with Fox as well. you kind of go and listen to those unorthodox, heterodox voices. Oh, I never know what they're going to say about Aaron Rodgers or Peyton Manning or whomever the topic of du jour might be, whether that's politics or sports. You go there. Howard, for my generation, just hasn't had any of that influence, and part of it is the failing business model of Sirius XM radio. I used to have Sirius XM radio in my car. I know my whole family did, and we just don't anymore. Why? Well, because we can get cell reception anywhere, and so we can always choose to listen to what podcasts or what music to play on Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever you get your music. And it's just not as valuable of an asset for sure. And so if Howard does decide to go independent, I think, one, that would be a super interesting case study to see if a legacy figure can successfully, pull off that transition after they've kind of been mainstreamed and beaten down. But two, if there is still demand for the type of content he produces, which is this like insider Hollywood content, because I think at the same time we're experiencing this weird death of celebrity. Like no one cares what the elites think anymore.
That's a good point. So Howard built his career on two main components, both of which have been neutered. One was he was edgy, and honestly, if we're being real, he was doing like quasi-pornographic, real out there FCC limited talk in the 1980s and 90s, and he was always in trouble, and that made him popular, and he'd say outlandish things and do outlandish things. That's not as much of his bit anymore. He still does some of that. I never found Howard that funny. That really wasn't my main draw. I think he had a cast of characters around him that made it fun, more so than funny. But the second thing is he was a great interviewer, and he really was. And I would offer he's probably the best. He's among the best that's ever done it, to be honest. Like when he was doing those interviews, and they were celebrity interviews largely, to be that type of content is everywhere. That's what most podcasts are. They're long-form interviews now. I will say no one is doing it as well as Howard did. Rogan is not I love Rogan. He's not as good of an interviewer as Howard Stern. Dax Shepard is super popular. My wife listens to Dax Shepard. Certainly not as good of an interviewer as Howard Stern. He had, in my mind, two great qualities. He's insanely curious, and he has conversational OCD, which I'd like to think I have some of both of those things, which means he doesn't forget trains of thoughts while indulging the parentheticals and the side trips. So he hears something and he'll follow up on it, but he doesn't forget where he was on the road and comes back to it. So you never have this feeling when you're listening, oh, he left that fruit on the tree. He picks everything off and everybody opened up with him. But you make a really interesting point. As good as an interviewer as he is, celebrity culture itself has totally died. Like no one cares anymore. I did go listen to Brad Pitt on Dax Shepard's podcast because you so rarely hear from Brad Pitt. But I rarely care about hearing from a celebrity anymore, Bradley.
Yeah, and I listened to the Brad Pitt episode too, and they have this interesting friendship that goes back several years, and that type of credibility is what you need if you're a Dax Shepard who's not nearly as good as Howard.
But by the way,
like
that
Howard,
was a bad, in my mind, that was a bad interview. I was like, oh my God, follow up. Oh my God, be curious. I'm going to be real. I don't have anything personal against him. It wasn't a good interview of Brad Pitt.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to go back and re-listen to it to figure out where he leaves the fruit on the tree. But from being in this business, like making sure you pick all the fruit is so difficult, especially when you don't have a lot of rapport with someone. And Howard just had that way of like totally disarming and then taking everything that you could. Like I think some of the best segments he ever did were like with Dave Grohl, and Dave Grohl's telling you an inside story about what happened with Nirvana or like Foo Fighters or something like that. Like those were always really solid. And you had someone in the chair like Dave Grohl who's like interesting, heterodox. Well, you bring in these celebrities now and they are so PR trained. They're so media trained. They're so TikTok brained. Like they don't have thoughts that extend past 20 seconds. And so what is there left for him to pick if they are so anchored down? I can't get into any trouble with what I say. I'm constantly afraid of the mob coming after me.
That's interesting.
I mean, like, what is he going to learn from, let's pick like Taylor Swift or something? Like maybe he can disarm her and get her to say a bunch of interesting stuff. But at this point, so far into her career, with all this massive success, she's got her PR stuff on lockdown. And so do a lot of these megastars.
All right, lastly, I was watching Fox and Friends this morning, and I just heard this from Fox's own Jimmy Fallon, and I had never thought about Stephen Colbert's failure in these terms. Jimmy said, yeah, he is on the left and an anti-Trump guy, but he was also, just on a talent perspective, very limited. Listen to Jimmy Fallon.
Obviously, we've been saying for years this is an activist masquerading, okay, as a comedian. But it's not just because of his political bias. It's because of his limitations as a comic. He got famous playing a right-wing pundit on Comedy Central. That was that show was just one big conservative joke. So when they took off the facade of the character and made him be himself, that was still all he knew how to do. So he couldn't change this even if you took the political allegiance out of it.
That's such a great
That's
point.
really interesting, Bradley. Like, right? Like what was it called? Was it called the Colbert Report on Comedy Central?
Yeah, something like that.
It was one big spoof of conservatives. Like, that was his whole bit. And so he doesn't have anything more. He went over to be a mainstream, broad-ranged comic on CBS, and all he had was the thing that he's always done, just without the satire, just without the character. And it's not any good without that. So he's just limited, honestly, in his talent.
Yeah, there's starring actors, there's supporting actors. And Colbert has played the supporting actor his entire career. He got the shot at being the main guy, and he failed miserably. And I also think there's something about the nature of the character that he was playing. A right-wing pundit, right? If you, generally, the left is known for openness. But when we're talking about comedy, I think the right is what's known as the open folks when it comes to the world of comedy. Like, they're not worried about being labeled a racist or having an offensive joke. The left is what's really concerned about that. And so the nature of being a right-wing pundit, even for a show that spoofs conservatives, is that you have that latitude with the audience because the audience knows it's parody. And so you can be, more comedically enterprising. And when that character is taken away from you, you don't have that protection anymore. You have to stay in your lane, and you have to make sure that your jokes are pleasing all the Karens out there that might get mad at you for potentially even implying something offensive by a joke that you said. So I think it's such a good point that Jimmy makes.
All right, check out Bradley at the Daily Signal. He also hosts the Signal Sit Down, which he has some experience there with some of the interview stuff we were talking about. Check out that podcast. Before he goes, 2-a-days, I had you look it up. People are always like, Will, don't text. It's super rude when you're in a conversation. First of all, I can multitask, and this is how I communicate with my staff. I'm not like talking to my buddies because I'm bored with what Bradley's saying. I'm like, hey, so I just texted him, Bradley. I said, look up husky. When you said it, I gave you the working dog thing, and I was like, it's a good theory. But there is something about the husky that says to me, Seattle coffee drinker as well. Like, yeah, I work, but I'm also a little different than everybody else. I could see a husky being a PC bro. So what does ChatGPT say about the husky 2-a-days?
So the definition is constantly howling, loves attention, gorgeous but dramatic, would definitely derail a protest with a TikTok dance. So it's liberal.
I don't know. This kind of sounds like the standard poodle thing that we were talking about with, I know plenty of people in Dallas who keep themselves looking good who are incredibly conservative. I think this is classic Orange County dog. This is where I'm from. This is Orange County, California. They want to be the center of attention, but they still, oh yeah. They want to be the center of attention, but they still are a country club conservative at heart. So disagree with you, ChatGPT.
It's too hot. The husky, I feel bad when I see the Huskies in Orange County or in someplace like Texas. I'm like, that poor dude. Even a German Shepherd. Sometimes I see German Shepherds here in Texas. I'm like, oh my God, that poor guy. He's wearing like a double down fur coat in 100-degree heat. He belongs in the north. That's where he's supposed to be.
Keep him short.
So I don't know.
Keep him short.
All right, check out Bradley at the Signal Sit Down at the Daily Signal. Bradley, it's great to have you on. Thanks for being here today.
Will, thanks as always.